Tell me what got gun on that dirt. Yeah. Yo, if I were Rochester, it would be insane. Knowledge flowing like the sweetest rain. Professor Bear on the mic, spreading wisdom wide. The best thoughts, that's my pride, can't hide.
With the voices in your ear, changing the game.
If I rule podcast, every thought we'd ignite. In a world of chatter, we'll spark in the fight. With Professor Bear, we're climbing to new heights. A best thoughts podcast, shining bright in the night. Topics from the heart, never sounding the same. God laughs at debates, never dull or bland. From culture to tech, take you by the hand. Join the ride with us, feel the vibe expand. With every episode, we shine that
beginnings on the cusp. Not too old to adjust. Old dog, new tricks. Remember, I was just a pup. Something dirty in my cup. Clean soul.
So tune in, don't miss what we got to share. If I rule podcasting, I spread the love everywhere.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me this evening. I am Professor Bear, and this is a Bear's Thoughts. And 2026 has been such an amazing year already, with so many different guests and learning so many different stories and different styles of podcasting and different things. But on top of all of that, it's my way of giving back to the other podcasters out there that work their butts off to give their thoughts and their opinions on wrestling. So this is the professor's way of saying thank you and giving those flowers. And my guest this evening is very different in his podcast. And for me, being an old school wrestling fan as I am, I always sit and think about the past a lot. And I think a lot of people do this. When you grow up, you have that real great memory and you think it's the best. So I'm a big 80s wrestling guy. I love the territory. And my guest today, he has the greatest concept ever because it goes back into so many great memories. This is Gene. Gene, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Professor. Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to this, and should be a fun conversation with a couple of podcasters.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, as I always ask the first question, how did you get to become a wrestling fan?
I remember, like, my dad would have wrestling on when I was real little, and I'd kind of pass through and see it. So go ahead and spoil this right out of the gate. I'm 48. Okay, so around, like, I can remember being in the room and seeing certain guys in the ring and around like 82, 83. Around 85, I started paying a little more attention to it. But I'll tell you, and I just realized this not that long ago, the night that it clicked with me and I locked in and I was like, I'm watching whatever wrestling I can find anytime it's on. Me and my dad was watching Saturday night's main event, and Ricky Steamboat was fixing to wrestle Jake the Snake Roberts. And as Ricky was getting up on the ring apron, Jake clotheslined him off of the floor, rolled out, and DDT'd him on the floor. And that was the most violent, ungodly thing I had ever seen in my life. I thought I had seen a murder right there in my living room on NBC, and I was hooked from that point on.
Oh yeah, and I remember that episode too, thinking, "Oh my God, I cannot believe they have not arrested this man for that."
Because, your friends and, different adults will tell you, oh, it stuff's fake, it stuff's fake. But my defense was like, that's on a concrete floor. You can't fake driving somebody's head into a concrete floor. And then you learn years later that Steamboat's head really did hit, and he really did, it messed him up for a bit. And, that's why it looks so good, because it looks so real, because it more or less was to a degree. Bless his heart. That's the thing that hooked me. But now, once I got going, I had a love for Memphis wrestling and continental wrestling. I grew up in North Mississippi, so we were in a position where we got TV5 out of Memphis, so I could see the live Memphis show, but we got WCB out of Columbus, and that had Continental on every Saturday night. Those are my two favorites because they would come to the area, so I could go to live Continental matches. I could go to live Memphis matches, and so to me, like WWF and even like Crockett and stuff to a degree is kind of like, all right, that's the big superhero type wrestling. That stuff, I mean, they're cool. I'm a fan of those guys, but you felt the guys in like Memphis and Continental were more relatable. I mean, these dudes look like somebody that, might hang out with your dad or something. A lot of those guys, Don Bass and Roger Smith and, some of those guys. So that's what I followed the closest once I really, really was in full swing as a wrestling fan.
So with that being said, when did you start to think, hey, you know what? I can do a podcast about wrestling.
Oh, Lord. We'll back up a little bit from that. So like in 97, I started training and I got involved in wrestling, and I wrestled for a few years. And then I got married to my first wife. She hated wrestling, and we fought about it all the time. And just to have peace at home, I stopped wrestling, and I started writing columns for a couple of different websites on the internet. Did that for a while, and me and my buddy Neil Taylor, while I was still wrestling, we used to carry a camcorder around with us, and we was recording all this footage at shows. We'd record some of the matches. We'd record stuff in the dressing room. We'd record stuff when we were driving, when we were at the hotel, all this stuff. And we were like, we got all this footage. There's no way to share it. There's no internet at the time. There's no YouTube. None of that. So, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could do something with this type of stuff? And then, like I said, I wrote for a while, and then I got divorced from my first wife. I got back into wrestling for a little bit. And then all of a sudden this podcasting started. I don't know where it actually started, but I became aware of it in 2007. And so I was like, how do you do that? And so I don't know if you remember this or not. You remember Blog Talk Radio?
Yes, actually I do.
Okay, so I was one of the early adopters of Blog Talk Radio. And I guess to explain this name, I need to back up to another time while I was still wrestling. We did this angle at a show one night where me and Neil sat out in the audience as if we had just bought a ticket. We had been working for a rival promotion over in Mississippi. And so we go to the front door, we buy tickets, we sit in the crowd, and we start heckling all the wrestlers till finally we cross the barrier, get in the ring, and it's a big pull apart and all this kind of stuff. And the announcer, J.D. McKay, who also used to wrestle, said, get these guys out of here, they suck. I'm like, you're just jealous of us because we get all the heat. And because it was at that stage where like you were doing all this insidery stuff on like Raw and Nitro. Russo was doing his business and all that, so we were like, yeah, we get all the heat. And JD goes, that's because you get all that cheap heat. That's all cheap heat. It's not real heat. It's cheap heat. So just to be a jerk, I made that my brand. Like my articles that I wrote for Wrestling News Center and for Wrestling Right Online was called Cheap Heat with Gene Jackson. When I finally got around to learning what a podcast was, it was Cheap Heat Radio with Gene Jackson. And so At that point, I mean, the only people who had podcasts at that point in wrestling was like me, Colt Cabana, and like maybe two other guys. You know, you could count the wrestling podcasts on one hand. Now,
Right.
anybody that's ever lived has got a podcast. But at that time, the only obstacle I had when I would reach out to people, hey, you want me on a podcast? Usually the question was, what's a podcast? And I'd have to explain it to them. But most of them would do it. You know, I interviewed like some really like Jimmy Hart and I interviewed a lot of names that first year. The biggest name perhaps was Bruno Sammartino.
Oh, wow.
He had just re-released his book, and this mutual friend of ours who kind of worked as his agent, Sal Corrente, we were writing for the same website, and Sal hit me up. He's like, hey, man, I need a huge favor. I was like, yeah, what you got, man? He's like, I need to promote his book. Would you mind doing an interview with Bruno Sammartino? And I'm like, would I mind? I was like, no, that would be amazing. Of course I'll interview Bruno Sammartino. So I interviewed Bruno and Nick Dinsmore. I did a lot of Memphis people like Jamie Dundee, Ollie Stevens. Randy Hales had been out of the business for several years. I was the first person that did an interview with him. And I would alternate between like names and then like local indie guys and things like that. And then eventually I would take hiatuses. I'd do that for months, and then I'd take a break, and I'd bring it back, and all these sorts of things. And it was just like I said, I think it was the year before last. The older I get, the more time runs together. I mean, it's all a big blur. But 2.5 years ago, I guess it was, like I say, I had all this, I think we were talking about this before we started actually on the air here, but I have all this wrestling knowledge in my head, and I thought, well, I can't really do anything with it because people only want to hear stories from the actual people who were there. And then I start finding all these other podcasts, and then I met Ray Russell from WrestleCopia. He reached out to me. Jamie Ward had told him I would be a good co-host for a show reviewing Memphis 1985. And so he reached out, and I got to looking at how many subscribers he had and patrons he had and how much success he was having. I'm like, well, Ray wasn't here for any of this stuff. He's just like me. He's read all these books and listened to all these interviews and studied this stuff to where he knows it. And so he's like, yeah, man, I mean, people don't really care how you know it. They just care if you know it. So I jumped on board doing that with him. And then that wasn't enough. And I had all this USWA footage, like almost all of the USWA footage from 90 to 97. So I found a couple of buddies of mine that like wrestling. One of them is Nightmare Danny Davis's nephew, legit nephew.
Oh, wow.
And the other used to wrestle for Corey Macklin's Memphis Wrestling. And I asked them if they want to do it because they do like a comedy podcast every week. And so we started what I named the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. And basically, we started with 93 just because that's when all these WWF people come in. People found it interesting. Here you got Bret Hart in Memphis. You got Vince McMahon sitting ringside in Memphis. So we started with 93, and we did week-by-week reviews. We would do the show, we would show clips, and at the end of the show, we would say what was our favorite part, what was our least favorite part, and would we buy a ticket to go to that Monday night's card. And it just caught on. We got a lot of followers that they'll watch the show during the week, and then they'll listen to our podcast, and they message us, and that spun into a couple of other podcasts that I do now that are of that similar vein. But the USWA one's the one right now has got the biggest following, aside from, and this is a whole other story, the weekly podcast I do with Dangerous Doug Gilbert and Tommy Wildfire Rich called Dangerous Conversations.
I have a friend. Well, before I get into that, guys, girls, you see a QR code that's up in the corner. That is to my friend Gene's Facebook. No, excuse me. I was about to say Facebook, but it is actually to the YouTube page where you can see all of his different podcasts. And what I love about it, again, is it's like being there again for a person who has that knowledge and knows so much history, especially about Memphis wrestling. I sometimes I just catch myself listening to it, and it's like, man, it's like watching a VCR tape in my mind of there. I'm there again. I remember it, and it's like, wow, this is just such an amazing thing. But what I was going to say before is, I have a friend. Her name is Amy, and she is such a wonderful, wonderful woman. She knows her wrestling history, and she has a lot of friends, and one particular friend is Doug. And she was telling me, she's like, you might want to reach out to him. Maybe he'll do your podcast. And I'm like, okay, cool. I would love to talk to Doug Gilbert. Man, loved his brother, his dad. Man, that would be good. So I think I've reached out, and for whatever reason I didn't follow up or whatever. But it got me to run down to seeing how much stuff that you have and do, and so impressed by it. And I love the fact, because of the knowledge that I have, but for people who has never seen it, don't know anything about it, listening to your stories is like being there in a time machine. You're there. You're feeling the emotion, seeing when Jerry Lawler got hit by the car. I mean, just those things. And it's such a different podcasting style that I love. With doing the podcast those different ways, was it okay? I'm doing this. I want to be a little different than other people, or was it just, this is my niche, this is what I'm doing?
A little of both. Interview. I'm sure you can maybe attest to this. Doing weekly interviews is a challenge. Getting in touch with people, locking down a date, them being able to actually record on that date. I've got to, on my YouTube channel, when somebody pops up and I want to interview them, I'll interview them and I'll throw it on the channel, but I don't promise interviews every week because it's too stressful for me, especially doing all these other shows. But actually, me and Brian Trammell did a podcast several years ago that he came up with called "Was It Really That Good?" And that's the first time that I got to do a podcast where we watched and talked about old wrestling. And at the end of the show, he would ask, okay, this show's been around for years, everybody talks about it, but having rewatched it now at our current age and our level of fandom, was it really that good? And we'd either answer yes or no. And it provided a cool hook for the show. It kind of kept you around to the end. Well, let's see what these guys say about the show, if they liked it or they didn't. And so I knew whenever I come up with a concept of doing this USWA show, I was like, I want to figure out something at the end where if you've listened all the way through, there's something to stick around for. And it gets people to message us, comment, send us private messages. Oh, I would have went to that show. Or better yet, I did go to that show. And here's what they didn't tell you on TV, and give us other little tidbits that then the next week on the show, like, hey, we got a message from this person. Guess what? This happened too. So I love it. I love having an excuse to go back and watch these old Memphis shows and then getting to talk about them. And so originally the guy that was on there, Richard, he had to step out for season 2 because he had some personal things going on. And Brian Trammell, who's a podcaster, we started around the same time, and he's very knowledgeable in Memphis. He's older than I am. I'm sure he'd love me mentioning that for no reason, but he stepped in. And so Josh, like I told you, Josh is Danny Davis's nephew, but he's never been in the business. He's always been a fan. He's got a little more inside knowledge than your average fan, but he still looks at it as a fan, so it gives a unique perspective. It's not 3 guys who are always cynical. Like me and Brian, sometimes it throws us off because like recently we did a show where they did just 2 weeks in a row, they did loser leave town matches between Eric Embry and Bill Dundee. And 2 weeks in a row, they found creative ways to finagle their way out of it, and nobody left town. And me and BT was pretty harsh about it. And then Josh was like, but still, as a fan, and he explained his perspective, and we're like, all right, that's okay. We didn't look at it that way. And so I really love having that viewpoint of having, different age range, different types of fandom in the show, because it gives a few different perspectives to give on it. So, but man, I appreciate all the nice words you said there, man. I get a lot of good feedback on it, and I'm really happy that we are. Like I say, me and Brian do a Patreon-only retro wrestling review CWA podcast where we're covering 1987 now. And I've got to be careful because I'm starting to overextend myself, because you got to make you got to watch these shows, make notes, and there's a lot of preparation involved. And you start getting too many going per week. I don't ever want the quality to start to slack because I got too many irons in the fire,
Oh my God, I know the feeling. So, to the concept of giving everybody flowers, and for me, I know there's a lot of different animosity out there between podcasters, and it's nothing personal. It's just like, hey, this is how I make my money. I'm not going to advertise you. You're not going to take away some of my views, which I understand. But then for me, as a wrestling fan, I'm 52 years old. I've been watching wrestling ever since I can remember. My father was a wrestling fan. As a fan, never been in the business, never been a wrestler or any behind the stage element of it. I have my thoughts on it. So when I got a chance to do a podcast and give my opinion, it was like, okay, that'd be cool. Never once did I really think that people would look at me and be like, wow, you're very knowledgeable. Wow, you have an insight that I never looked at. I never looked at it like that. So once we started growing, I started thinking to myself, oh man, I don't ever want to insult anybody in the business. That's always in the back of my mind. I'm here as a guest. Let me be respectful. Let me do the best I can. And the old wrestling saying is, leave the business better than you found it.
Yeah.
And that was my goal then, and my mentality. So when I started meeting wrestlers and meeting some of my heroes, and they're telling me how well I do, and they can tell the real passion I have, I'm thinking, wow, wow, where I just thought it meant something to me, now I see my passion means something to everyone. And for people that we watched and loved, when they give you compliments, and I can look on my phone and I got Ricky Morton's telephone number, like, what the hell? Yeah. And wrestlers come up and like, man, can I get an autograph from you? Like, wait a minute, stop. What? So in that long-winded speech that I'm giving, it's just, you just never know how much you touch people and never understand how your point of view means so much to so many people. So that's why I feel like everyone needs to get their flowers, because there's a lot of time we never give our heroes and people we look up to flowers, because until after they're gone. Yeah. They can't. And it's like, no, I want you to have the acknowledgement what you mean to your fans, my fans, to me. And want to, if no one else ever tells you what you do for the wrestling business, let me tell you, thank you. You do so much and continually. This business is big enough for all of us. Let's enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's crazy that podcasting has gotten to be like as cutthroat as the actual wrestling business. Like, people don't want to acknowledge other podcasters. Like, oh, they may go listen to them instead of me. It's like, look, everybody knows there's 5 million podcasts out there. It's not a secret. It's not like one day they're going to wake up and go, wait a minute, you mean there's other shows beside yours? Well, yeah, of course there is. But I mean, I understand with the frustration some people have where they've sunk a lot of money and time into these podcasts, and now you got these guys that come along that's kids basically that don't know anything about the era of wrestling we're talking about, and they'll pay these guys some money to come on their podcast, and they don't know anything about them. They can't even relate to them. Like, you said you don't always do background, but you know enough about wrestling, you've studied enough, you've got a concept of what they're talking about, and usually it'll click something. Oh, yeah, that. These kids have no idea. And then you got them on there interviewing somebody, that's been in the business for 40 years, and they're trying to talk about them like, hey, didn't you beat who was that cowboy guy? The one with the cowboy hat, Funk or something like that. I mean, then you watch that and you're just like, oh gosh. But I mean, like you say, there's enough room for everybody. The funny thing was, like, when I took a step back and I decided what kind of show I wanted to do, I was like, there's been a bunch of shows covering Mid-South. There's been a bunch of shows covering WWF. Jim Crockett Promotions has had their share. Old 80s Memphis, a lot of people are doing that. I was like, nobody's touched USWA. And so my buddy Brian, I was telling you about earlier, who's now a host, one of the hosts of the show, I told him, I was like, I got this idea. And I laid out everything about it. And I said, it'll be covering USWA from the 90s. He starts laughing. He's like, who's going to listen to a podcast about USWA? He's like, you're wasting your time. I go, well, look, I want to do something that nobody else is doing. I want to have my own, carve out my own spot here. And I was like, it'll either work or it won't, but at least I'm trying something new. And he's ate those words many times now. I bring it up to him like, oh, the guy who said he would never listen, not only did you listen, you eventually joined the show because you were already listening every week and watching the shows with us. So, I don't know. I always like to give him a hard time about that.
So, with your diversity and everything you do, if I was a first-time guy who was just thinking about doing podcasts, what would be your advice to me?
Why are you doing it is the first thing I would ask. What's your intentions here? Are you doing this out of love for wrestling and you feel you have something to contribute, or are you wanting to do it because, hey, I see all these other people doing it and I think it might be fun for me to do it, or maybe I could weasel my way into something. It could be my ticket into some money somewhere along the way. That's the first thing people understand. There's no money in podcasting. Sure, Conrad Thompson has money, and his makes money for a variety of reasons. Brian Last makes money doing podcasts, but the rest of us are all doing it for the love of the game. I promise you.
Yeah. Oh my God. Please read. It blows my mind on how many people think that we make a ton of money. And it's like, if you knew how much money I sink into this, you would wonder why in the hell I still do this.
Yes.
And
I finally was able to build up enough Patreon patrons that it pays for, that's all it does is pay for me to podcast. I'm not in the hole anymore. Pays for the StreamYard and all the different, because there's a lot of different things that are involved in this, that you got to do. People think, oh, it's free to podcast. No, it's not. There's the equipment, there's the actual StreamYard, and there's, to make these, you got to have software to make all the thumbnails and all kinds of stuff that nobody thinks about. If you get a .com, you got to pay for those every year.
Yeah.
I've got several of those now. So there's a lot of costs involved. And luckily, this past year, it started paying for itself. And for me, that was like, that's a win right there. I'm not paying to do this, but I'm not making any money either. But that's a big misconception people have, or they're going to work their way up to that. And if you can, go for it. But I don't even really know. I know Conrad pays those guys because the whole podcast thing he does is to promote his mortgage business. So
That's
he's
what I
able
was
to
gonna
take
say.
that money and put it back into the podcasting because one's helping fund the other. I don't know exactly how Brian Last makes money off his cornet thing, but I've heard he does. But anybody else, you just gotta hope you get picked. Somebody picks you up to do some advertising, and you can be one of the 10,000 podcasters plugging Blue Chew. Put in P Bear 45 at the end, and I'll get 50 cents. Because I don't know what that pays, but dude, it can't be paying as many podcasts plug that every week. They can't be paying a lot. Let's be honest.
One of the funniest things that I have experienced since I started podcasting is like, okay, I want sponsorship, so it can help pay for the show. And I'm looking and I'm like, oh man, okay, I found one. I'm not going to say their name because I don't want to throw no shade at them. But then I was like, okay, I have to work to make money. Okay, that makes sense. But then I happened to be listening to a couple other podcasts, and they had the same advertisement. I'm like, how in the hell is anybody making money if everybody's doing the same advertisement?
Yeah.
It's like, this is crazy.
Yeah, I just do it because I love doing it. If somehow it ever does turn into some kind of money, hey, great. But so back to your original question, my suggestion would be one, figure out for yourself why you want to do this, and the second thing is, what can you contribute? What can you do to make your show different? What can you bring to the table that other people don't? Not knocking anybody, but just like what are your talents? What's your knowledge? What's your something that you can use to your advantage to do this? Because at this point, there's so many podcasts. There's been so many shoot interviews. Most all the well-known wrestlers have been interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's really hard to find a question that you're going to ask them that they had already answered somewhere else a million times over. So I think you need to, if you're in it to do interviews, maybe it's good to go for like local guys and independents, because these are people. That's what, like, I eventually did a podcast. Cheap Heat Radio evolved into a podcast I called Locals to Legends Wrestling Radio, because some weeks it'd be local guys and other weeks it'd be legends. And my intention there was for independent guys, and especially local guys and gals, they only got so much time on the microphone at a show, or even if they have TV or a YouTube show or whatever it may be. They don't have a lot of time to get themselves over, so I wanted to give them a forum to let them come on, tell us about yours. And I always told guys, like, look, you can come in character or not, but I would highly suggest in this hour that we talk, or whatever it turns out to be, get your character over, because sometimes it takes months to get a character over because they only see you in your 8-minute match and your 45-second promo. It's hard to get all that out there, so put it out there here. Use this to your advantage. Tell your story. Tell the story you want told. And I had a lot of people, reach out wanting to do the show, and it wasn't hard to get guests, but man, it's hard as hell to schedule them guests, like we talked about earlier. Getting people, everybody wants to do it, but getting them there is another story.
Oh,
but yeah, now, when I picked USWA and I got, berated for it, and it turned out it actually worked. There's a guy now that's doing like Sunday Night Heat reviews from the 2000s, like. Have we got a market for that? But then again, I may be wrong. I may be the jerk this time when it's like, yeah, I got 1,000 patrons from Sunday Night Heat. But it's getting to where almost everything is getting touched. But here's the thing: I wouldn't say shy away from it. Like if you were like the all-time Global Wrestling Federation fan, or Continental, or whatever it may be, if you have knowledge of it and you enjoy watching it and you enjoy speaking on it, and you have something interesting to bring to the table, the majority of people may not like this other guy's global show or Mid-South show or whatever. they may be drawn to you. So guess what? They'll pick yours over there. So I wouldn't say don't do something just because other people are doing it, which that sounds, like I'm being contradictory to what I initially did. But like now, one of the shows me and my buddy Bob do is a WCW podcast. And all it is watch-alongs on Patreon where we watch Clash of the Champions and pay-per-views throughout a year. We're starting in 89. And, there's been plenty of different WCW shows, but we have a different perspective on it. Like even for like the USWA show, we can be serious. Between me and Brian and Josh, we have a lot of knowledge and backstage knowledge because I've gotten to be friends with a lot of these guys in recent years. So I can call them and go, hey, what was going on here? And then they can usually tell me or point me to somebody that can. But we try to bring humor into it, make it fun. And so I always like to say we put over the things that deserve to be put over, but we have some fun with some of the silly. Because let's be honest, no matter how much any of us love Memphis, they did some silly stuff in Memphis at different times. I mean, we're right in the thick of Tagar, Lord of the Volcano, right now in 1991.
And funny that you say that because I was sitting there watching that. As much as I did not want to watch that, I couldn't stop watching it.
So for all the home runs that Memphis hit, they struck out their fair amount as well. In the 91, we're talking about Tagar, Lord of the Volcano. In 85, we recorded an episode last night, and we've got Boda the Witch Doctor has just shown up and defeated Lawler for the Southern Heavyweight title. And clearly it was just, hey, Tom Ernesto has taken over the booking. He's run just about every decent wrestler out of town. We need a big heel for Lawler. Hey, you remember that time we took James Harris and we made him into a Ugandan warrior and he got over like gangbusters and now he's a superstar all over the world? I bet we could do it with somebody else. I bet we could probably do it with that 4-foot island guy over there. Maybe not. I mean, when he has to look up at Bill Dundee, come on now. I don't know if that's a main event guy right there.
Yeah. So with that being said, you also do indie promotion. Can you tell me the difference in doing indie promotion versus doing USWA?
Huge difference. So, I'm not trying to be that guy, but I had got to the point where I had just kind of checked out on current wrestling. I don't keep up with WWE these days. I checked out on AEW whenever they fired Punk. I just really didn't keep up with much current wrestling, but I would try to keep up with EPW because I would drop in now and then for commentary and things like that. And so USWA has been dead since 97. And we're just going back talking about things that happened a long time ago. And if we make fun of somebody, it may get back to them. We may get an email. I mean, Tux Newman's son messaged me and Ray Russell about some things we said about Tux Newman on the 85 show and that he thought wasn't fair. A couple people have reached out to me about jokes we've made on the USWA show. People I didn't realize were even still alive to care. And it turns out they are. And I smooth things over. But being I do the play-by-play commentary for TV on EPW each week, so I feel like whatever I'm doing for it needs to be promoting it. I'm not going to do a podcast where if they botch something or a storyline didn't go the right way, I'm not going to get on there and laugh at it like we do on the USWA show. And honestly, I just had a conversation with somebody else about this the other night. If you look at the Gene Jackson on the USWA show, the Gene Jackson on the Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich show, and then the Gene Jackson you see on EPW Wrestling every week. 3 very different guys. Very different guys. There's certain people who have names on their show, and they bicker back and forth with them, and I won't call them names, but it's already been said on this show at one point tonight, so you can probably put the pieces together. But, they bicker back and forth with them, and they argue and things like that. I don't ever do that to Doug and Tommy. I'm just there to ask the questions, to bring up the topics. I read off fan questions that they send in. I'm never going to be contentious with them. Now, I did get the opportunity to take a trip to Philadelphia to the ECW arena for Joe Goodhart's reunion show. and I got to go spend the weekend with them. Me and Tommy split a hotel room together. And so we had some fun. And when we came back and told the stories of some of the things that went on there, we joked back and forth and everything like that. But pretty much I just stay in my lane on that show. But the USWA show, I'm the main host of it. So I'm a little more vocal on that show about things I like and don't like and things of that nature. And then on EPW, I'm an employee. I'm here to promote the brand. I'm not going to speak ill of it. Not that there's really anything to speak ill of, but if somebody got up there and went to the top rope to do something and they bust their butt, we would replay it 3 times on the USWA show and laugh about it and have a whole 20-minute segment on it. Where here's like, cover it up. It didn't happen. So yeah, it's very different. Like, for a long time after I quit enjoying current wrestling, I kept watching it because it's what I've always done. I've always just watched wrestling. There was people would ask me about what was later deemed as bad promotions. Like, did you watch that when you was a kid? Yeah, absolutely. I didn't distinguish between good wrestling and bad wrestling. It was all just wrestling, and I wanted to watch it, And I eventually hit a point where I'm like, look, I got all these podcasts to do. I got a full-time job. I don't have time to shoehorn in Dynamite and Raw, and I don't even like them or fast forward through them. So I just kind of stopped watching them. And so the promoter of EPW, he's an old school guy, and he tries to, it's the current style of wrestling, but he tries to impart some old school angles and things into the story. Doug and Tommy came to EPW recently and challenged the tag team champions, and man, people loved it. I mean, Boonville, Mississippi was on the route for USWA back in the day, so they'd been there a lot. So it was a great night. The crowd ate it up, and they were happy to be there. So I like stuff like that. But they bring in Heath Slater, and they had the NWA World Champion there this past Saturday, Silas Mason. They had the APA there for their big Crossroads Clash back earlier in the year. Bunch of Scott Steiner. I've had a bunch of names pass through there in the last couple of years. So they're just getting bigger and bigger, man. They've got they keep adding on all these different networks, and they're now in front of potentially 22 million homes on TV. We're on YouTube, so we're all over the world and stuff, which they are on YouTube. But the actual television show itself are on TV networks that reach 22 million homes, and they got more deals in the future to expand that. So it's pretty cool to be on there.
I love that. It's I think it's a great balance. You still use TV plus, there's YouTube to get further out for people who would never be able to watch your show and keep up with it. With EPW, how long has it been running?
EPW originally started in, I don't know, maybe like 2000, 2001. And it was a small show on the side of the road in Boonville, an old mechanic shop type place in a tin building out there. And just an old school Mississippi show where even into the 2000s, as wrestling was evolving, they were still, hey, pull my hair, he pulled my tights, he's got a chain. And got fat guys like me out there that had no athleticism for the most part. And then here about 5 years ago, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, Neil told me, you're not gonna believe what I did. And I was like, what? He's like, I bought EPW. I'm like, to do what? And he's like, to run it. And I'm like, why didn't you just start from scratch? Like, you're going to be saddled with the history of that place. And he's like, well, we're going to slowly evolve it. He said, I ain't wanting to grow it big. He said, I want to promote, because he'd gotten out of the ring and he still had that itch, but he knew he didn't want to keep wrestling. And so he got the show, and over the next couple of years, slowly but surely, fixed up the building, painted it, got banners, and made everything, got a new ring. Every time I'd go, it'd be a little nicer, a little nicer, a little nicer. And then he said, well, we're going to get on TV. I was like, oh, boy, this is where things go sideways. but it didn't. He started out on like local. It's a regional channel, but like WTVA and Tupelo, and so they were on at like 11 a.m. between two church services, 30-minute shows, a church service, EPW wrestling, church service. And I'm like, that's a weird sandwich for wrestling, but okay. But it did great numbers, so then they got moved over to, added to another station with a better time slot. And then here we are 3 years later. They've done over 200 episodes, and they're on all these different, sports networks. And he's got people knocking the door down, wanting to come work for him. So like I say, I'm excited to be a part of it. I've wrestled, I've managed, I've promoted, I've reffed, I've booked, I've done everything you can do in wrestling, but I'd always felt like the real goal for me, the role that I was meant to do is commentary. I prefer color commentary, but I'm fine with play-by-play as well. But that's something I've always wanted to do, and nobody's really had big TV around there to do it. I've done some announcing on various shows in Alabama over the years, but none of it was really any significant TV. So, when you sit down behind that mic and the guy puts a camera in your face and you realize potentially, they're not all watching, but it's potentially 22 million homes out there about to see my mug on there talking. It's pretty wild.
With that, with today's wrestling, and I know you say you don't keep up with the AEW, WWEs, but how do you feel about the overwhelming resurgence of indie wrestling?
I think it's excuse me. I think it's necessary if they're going to continue to have wrestling in the future. I think it was catching up to them. When you get to looking around both promotions, and most of your main event guys, most of your guys that hold titles are in their 40s, and you got some talented people behind them, but you don't really have a place to create talent like they used to. Even NXT now has become a WWE brand. It's just another weekly TV show. There's not a house show loop. I just heard Brian Myers talking about this with Matt Cardona yesterday on a thing, because they talked about Cardona got himself re-signed, to WWE as Matt Cardona, not Zack Ryder, which is awesome. But Brian Myers was saying, how are they, he's like, we went through the system. We started in Deep South and went through the whole system, and by the time we got to the main roster, we had several years under our belt wrestling every night of the week. Now, they don't hardly have any house shows at all. It's just that TV. So I think it's great that independents are booming, because look at how many people who are in higher level positions, and especially AEW, but even WWE, are guys who made their name on the indies. They weren't really guys that come up through their OVW or even NXT. Most of those guys that got famous through NXT had already been around for years. That's the thing too, is like, you think, oh, these cool indies guys getting their break. God, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin have been around for as long as I can remember, and they're pushing 40, but on TV, they seem like this new young talent. We've never heard them before. Like, no, these guys have been wrestling forever. And eventually, somebody's got to fill those shoes, but they got a few standout people. I keep up. I never just totally not keep up with it. I read about it and I watch clips on YouTube and things like that. And I know, Steiner's son is up and coming, and poor Seth Rollins can't wrestle 3 matches without injuring himself and having to go back out again, which really stinks. But yeah, I'm glad to see independent wrestling is on an upswing. I hope it continues down that path.
One thing, especially this year, and we had talked a little bit off camera about how 2025 for me personally was such a banner year, getting to go to Texas and getting to see a lot of different indie wrestling. And I caught myself at a lot of them where like yourself, I think. When I go to a wrestling, I look at it a little different than most people. And a lot of times I would just close my eyes and just listen. And I could tell by the sound going on with the audience of how well it was doing. Because when you can close your eyes and you can't tell that you're not in a big arena,
Yeah.
it sounds that loud. The crowd is that passionate. To me, it's like, oh man, I feel like we're going, as I like to call it, I like we're in the territory times again, just bigger and better because you can be in Tennessee and watch a promotion in Washington State, know the roster in and out, and you know everything about it. And when you see someone that wrestles in Washington State and is coming to your area, you already know what type of person he is, his athletic prowess, and it's just so amazing. And there are so many great opportunities. Going back to when I asked you about advice on podcasting, the one thing that I always, when I started doing it, and I felt like my niche was to give the guys and girls opportunities to promote themselves, to learn how to do an interview, to get the chance to start practicing. So when they make it to that next level, they already got that down pat. They don't have to worry about that. They can worry about making sure they're wrestling and knowing the system they're in. And it's fun because I look at, man, I can see the next superstar. I can see your passion when we talk. I can see what your goal is. And it's so much fun to not only talk about the past and remember when John Cena was starting out with Samoa Joe before You Can't See Me and all that, and where he grew to be, and he just left and what his legacy went to. But you can see OVW, he had to become all of that before he became who he is now. And I think there's going to be so many different guys and girls out there that need a chance. And that's where I can play not a big part, but just a small part in helping them. And to also get fans to get invested, because we both know that if you're not invested into that wrestler, you won't care at all.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the cool thing about the independents is you never know who's going to be the next star. Like I used to do commentary for New South here in Alabama. Austin Theory used to be on their shows almost every month for quite some time. And then look at him. He was, Vince McMahon's right-hand man. He's in main events, and now he's just suddenly turned back up with the main faction there from what I hear. Saturday night at EPW, Silas Mason, who's the NWA World Champion, who was returning to wrestle as World Champion, started early in his career at EPW on those rough shows that I was talking about earlier. Mason Dixon Line was a tag team he was a part of, and those guys started out there. So, he talked about how cool it was for him to come back through those doors and see how much the promotion had grown and improved, how much he had grown and improved. And stuff like that's just really awesome. I love seeing things like that. And it used to be you think, well, this guy's over here in Alabama, he's in Mississippi, nobody's ever going to see him. But like you pointed out, with YouTube and with being able to put everything out there and you got footage to send, like they can find you anywhere if you if you're out there working hard and doing what you're supposed to do, and the right people see you who are able to pass that along to the right people. The sky's the limit. There's been a lot of people in the last few years that would not have got there during the McMahon era, but clearly that era is over. It's not coming back. So it's really exciting to see these guys and girls out there just going. I mean, I watched matches Saturday night and I was like, good Lord, like this. I can't believe I'm in Booneville, Mississippi, seeing these types of matches. Like, these folks have stepped their game up so much, and there's people driving from Georgia over there to be on that TV. There's people driving from Louisiana and all these different states because they know about their TV coverage now, and it gives people a chance to they do backstage. I help produce some of the backstage promos and backstage kind of skits, if you will, and I don't know. I like that side of it. I wish I had more time that I could sit in, like on their creative meetings they have during the week, and they'll ask me stuff every once in a while. Hey, what do you think about this, or what would you do with this? And I'll give them an idea, and sometimes they use it, and sometimes they don't. But I do really love the creative end of it too. Like back in the day when I was a kid, I would be on Wrestling Classics board writing fantasy league stuff, and I always loved doing that. The creative side of wrestling to me is really, really fascinating as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, as a former wrestler yourself, do you think if you had the opportunity that the new generation has with YouTube, podcasts, and etc., do you think your career could have been different?
Not as a wrestler. I wasn't athletic enough. As a manager, perhaps. I got into it wanting to be a manager, and I'm 6'2" and 320 pounds at the time when I show up at the training school. And I'm looking around the room, and the guy, Sammy Hall, who wrestled for Mid-South back in the day, who was doing the training, he said, you want to be a manager? And I said, yeah. And he said, look around this room. He said, you're twice the size of anybody in here. He said, how the hell are you going to go be in their corner managing them, and they're in there wrestling, and you look like you could beat the guy that were wrestling more than they could? I was like, yeah, I know, but I'm just not athletic enough. He's like, you're a big man. We can work around that. And he brought me up in the ring, and I took a few bumps, and I was like, all right, man, if you believe I can do it, I'll do it. And I was one of the only people ever went through his school. He never charged me a dime. He said, don't you tell anybody. He's passed away now, so he can't call me out on this. But, yeah, he trained me, and I wrestled, and I enjoyed it. But, when I got to Alabama, I went to Pro South Wrestling over here and became a manager. And I really, really loved managing. Like, those people wanted to murder me every week, like, because I believe in, like, old school heat. Like, even on those shows in Mississippi when we were still wrestling, like, at the end of the night, all the heels would go out there and glad hand with the fans and take pictures and all that. I wouldn't do it. I'd leave the building. And so everybody would be like, that guy's a jerk. And it's like, that's what I want to think. And so when I started managing over at Pro South, I just, didn't hang around after shows, didn't mingle with the crowd, and they believed this one old lady that was in the front row that always tried to, like, climb over the rail to get at people, and me especially. There was a big match coming up, and the promoter, Terry Beatty, had put posters all over town. It had my picture on it because I was managing one of the teams in the main event. That lady went around to every store in Piedmont, Alabama, took a cigarette, and burned a hole through my face in every poster. At her mother's funeral, Terry come in. She's standing over the casket looking at her mother. Terry comes in and puts his arm around her. And she goes, what are we going to do, Terry? And Terry said, well, hon, you'll be all right. You'll go on. I know you're going to miss her. She said, no, I ain't talking about that. What are we going to do about Gene Jackson and what he did to Amy Haven the other night when he hit her with that briefcase? He called me. I got home. He said, she was talking about you at her mother's funeral, dude. And I was like, oh, my God. And my last night there, I got ready. My job was moving me to Kentucky. And so I was going to have to leave for a while. And so we did a match, like a 10-man tag match. and if my team lost, I had to leave Pro South. And so my team loses, and I get the microphone, and everybody's na goodbye and all that jazz. And I kind of sat through all that till it started kind of to die down. That old woman's in the front row just screaming her head off. And I said, hey, look, if I could just be sincere for just a moment, okay? I'm leaving. I'm not going to come back under a mask. I'm not going to pull any stunts. These guys lost fair and square, and I'm leaving. But I want to say something sincere from the heart right now. Okay? Does everybody get that? Like, this ain't Gene Jackson. This is Gene Shylon. This is the real guy behind the character. Okay? You could hear a pin drop in there. I pointed to the old lady. I said, I'll never come back to Piedmont, Alabama ever again. Well, one thing could get me to come back. If I heard you died, I'd come back to piss on your grave. And I go, no, you know what? I hate standing in long lines. I won't be back. People, I come through the curtain, and they're like, how the hell do you manage to leave with more heat after loser leaves town? I said, that's perfect. When I come back in 6 months, hopefully they'll still be mad. And they were. When I came back, they were still mad. So
I love it. Love it. That goes back to that old school heat, knowing how to work a crowd.
My wife had to stop going to those shows because people figured out she was my wife and were starting to harass her.
Oh,
damn. And rather than deal with it, she just decided to stay home. Yeah, it got to a point where security had to stand by my car all night because people kept threatening to slash my tires and all that stuff. And all these young guys, as I was 15 years older than any of those kids on that show, and they're like, we ain't even heard of no shit like this. We thought, sorry, I know from supposed to cuss on here, but we never, we've heard Jim Cornette tell about this on shoot interviews and stuff, but we've never witnessed it, firsthand. But that's fun to a degree. And then, when you live 30 minutes away and then they run into you at, CC's Pizza one day, I'm not in the mood for it then,
Right.
So, I had a few crosswords with people, but that's all part of the fun, I guess. But, you mentioned 2025. I want to say this before we end up wrapping up soon, but personally, 2025 ended on a sour note for me in real life with my job, but professionally, or I guess I shouldn't say professionally, I should say hobby-wise, because that's what it is. In 2025, my podcast was doing excellent. I got to write a book about Eddie Gilbert with Doug Gilbert, which was a thrill. It's something I had been working on for years, and we finally got it done. Come right out of that, turn around and got to write a book with Wolfie D about his career, another Memphis guy that I was a big fan of and have gotten to be friends with. I got to make that trip to Philadelphia with Doug and Tommy. And, I always wanted to go to the ECW arena. I was a big ECW fan back in the day. Even though I liked old school stuff, at that point, it was time for something different, and ECW was it. And so to get to go to the ECW arena with those guys, Doug, who had jumped out of the crow's nest on top of J.T. Smith as the Dark Patriot, Tommy, who had been the big Don of the FBI, and them bringing me in the dressing room like, this is our guy Gene, and everybody treating me like I should be there, And at one point at the end of the night, I'm sitting in a circle of people. It was Shane Douglas, Todd Gordon, Tommy, Pitbull number 1, and somebody else who escapes me. But Shane's sitting there telling the story about the night that Pitbull 1 had come back after he got his neck broke, and Shane grabbed the halo and swung him around and threw him down. And he's like, that's one of the only times in wrestling I've ever been scared for my life. It got just dead silent, that white heat, as they call it, where you don't know if they want to kill you, what's going to happen. But I just sat there and looked around, for a minute, and I'm like, I grew up, Tommy Rich was a huge hero of mine because I watched so much Memphis wrestling. And then in college, I loved ECW. And I'm sitting here in the dressing room listening to Shane Douglas tell this story about an angle I watched on my dorm room TV with my college roommate. This is awesome. I never would have imagined this being a thing, and I get, now guys that I grew up watching on TV call my phone a couple of times a week, and I get to sit every week and pick Doug and Tommy's brain, ask them anything I want, and they'll answer it. And, it's 2025 has been something on that end of things. So I've got Tommy wants to write a book. So we're probably going to work on that soon. And I got 2 or 3 others who are wanting to write a book. But man, it's so time consuming. Like this year was tough trying to get these podcasts done while also trying to get a book written. 2 books it ended up being. It's a big task, but I definitely want to sit down and do one with Tommy, man. He's had such a career. And I mean, Doug asked me if I was going to do it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it, but we just need to do it when the time's right. I got a lot of stuff going on. He's like, it shouldn't take you long to write a book with Tommy. I was like, Doug, it took us 3.5 months to write a book about Eddie. Eddie started wrestling in 1979, and he passed away in 1995. I was like, Tommy started wrestling in like 77, and he wrestled last weekend. I'm like, he's got a lot of ground to cover, man. He's like, oh, well, yeah, that's true. So, but I definitely something I want to do, man. I think a lot of people would want to read that. And,
definitely.
And Tommy's pretty comfortable with me. I think he'd be pretty open and honest, and he knows I'm not going to put anything in there that he doesn't want in there. So it should be fun.
Well, I will like to thank you for a couple of things. One, for being a great guest, and the stories, man, it's just so amazing. But thank you for everything that you have done, will do, and will continue doing for the sport that we love. And again, I'm very appreciative that you were willing to do my show and give me the opportunity and my fans to learn more about you. And I hope that from this interview that some of my fans become your fans and support you and enjoy everything that you do. I am a big believer in giving people their flowers while they're here, to enjoy them, to smell them, and to understand. And it's something that I had to learn and still am learning, that we play so big of a role in people's life that we never know about or understand, where people are so depressed and just sick about life, but then they get to hear us, and that's what helps them make it to another day and pick their spirits up and stuff. So with all that being said, thank you so very much. I appreciate you being here and appreciate you letting me show you the appreciation that you well deserve.
Oh man, I appreciate you having me on. This is the way this stuff works, man. You know, some of my folks will, become fans of you. Some of your folks become fans of me, and it's all good for everybody. But I want to touch on one thing in particular you said right there that's really something I never really gave much thought to. But, there's been podcasts and TV shows and different things over the years that, like, I would look forward to coming on if I was in a funk or I was having a hard time. Like, well, I'm going to have this, and that's going to help me out. There's been so many people that have written us and said, man, I look forward to that podcast dropping every week on Tuesday night, because I know I'm going to be able to, sit back, listen to that. I'll learn some stuff and laugh and have a good time. And man, that means the world. Like, to think, and that's what drives me to do it. Like, in the past, like I said, I'd do it off and on. I'd do it a few months and I'd stop. Well, that's why I've made a point. We're episode 85 of the USWA show. We hadn't missed a single week since we started. Doug and Tommy show we do have to do in seasons because they got a lot of stuff going on. But that's what drives me to make sure that show comes out every week, because for those people, no matter if it's 50 people or one person, that specifically needs that show, I want it to be there for them, because that's a bigger purpose than anything else you could ask for. It's cool promoting wrestling, it's cool helping out people and telling stories, but people who really need it, man, you can't do any better than that. But hey, I thank you for what you're doing, man. I appreciate you giving me this platform to come on here and talk and tell stories, and appreciate you putting that link up there for the YouTube channel, folks. Check it out, Retro Wrestling Archive. There's almost 500 videos on there now. Some of them are podcasts, but any kind of wrestling you can think of from the past, there's some of it on there. It may not be all of it, but there's a little bit of everything on there, literally. Really hope you check it out. And again, Professor, I can't thank you enough. I've had a great time. I hope we could do it again sometime.
Oh, definitely. You definitely have an open invitation anytime you want to come on. And I was a big Georgia Championship wrestling guy. When they went to they turned to JCP. Man, matter of fact, I was was talking with somebody when we were talking the history of the horsemen, and we were talking about who was the worst horseman, and we it boiled down to Mongo and Paul Roma, and I said, well, no disrespect to Paul because Paul put in work, but they put him in the worst situation that he was never going to get over as a horseman. Once he left, him and wonderful Paul Orndorff were an amazing team that does not get enough praise, but he was the worst horseman. I could be in my. I'm 52 years old with bad back, two fake hips, and I could be a better horseman than Paul Roma. So,
no argument here. I liked Power and Glory. I liked him and Mr. Wonderful, pretty wonderful, but no, he was not. Especially when everybody was expecting Tully Blanchard to walk out there, and here comes Paul Roma, and like. Paul Roma, one of the young stallions. What,
yeah,
is this? That's what you're doing?
The first thing that came to my mind is they stole the jobber from WWF and put him in the best group. I've went to the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. And that drug on way long. I thought, well, they'll figure this out in a couple of weeks and remedy this. No, he was in there a lot longer than he had any right to be. And he'll still defend it to this day. You hear him talk, and he'll tell you how he was better than any of the rest. And I will say this for him: he should feel that way, because if you're not proud of yourself, who else is going to be? But I will say, Paul, you were the worst, my friend. I love you. Again, Pretty Wonderful, the Young Stallions, Power and Glory. I loved you in all of that. But as a horseman, you were ashamed. I would have rather seen Hornswoggle be a horseman than Paul Roma. I think he could get more forgiveness and respect for people if, when he's asked about that, if he'd just say, you know what, I understand. I have full confidence in my abilities. I think I'm as good as any of those guys. But my persona and who I had been before I got to WCW was not a good fit for the Horsemen. It just wasn't. And leave it at that. And I think people are like, okay, well, he's got self-awareness. Cool. Yeah. But when he's like, no, I was better than all them guys. I should have been the only Horseman. Then you're just like, oh, shut up. Please get out of here with that.
Considering that you couldn't even win a singles mid-card title, shut up.
Exactly.
Well, guys, girls, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Again, this is going to be all this month. The showcase is on other podcasters and their greatness and what they bring to the sport that we all, and I did mean sport, the sport that we all love and cherish. So please, as I always leave out these shows, please support your indie wrestling near you. You never know who you will see on their journey, and maybe you'll get to see them to the top of that journey. But support it. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's worse. But just please support it.
It's important.
It is. Guys, I am Professor Bear. This has been a Bear's Thought, and we will see you around the campfire very, very soon. Y'all have a great evening.